Hey everyone, so I really wanted to just go through and kind of improve my React skills. And so one of the ways that I like to do that is making videos of learning and using React. So the intent of these videos are for people that know JavaScript or kind of hobbyists in the development world. Maybe you're just starting a job as a junior developer, but you have some coding chops, but maybe you haven't ever used React or haven't ever done test-driven development, or there's lots of pieces that kind of get in or should get integrated into this video series. So let's just start learning. And React is a really nice framework. It's a front-end framework that allows us to build HTML pages or native pages, if you're using React Native, in a fairly intuitive way once you kind of get used to it. A lot of big companies are using it. A lot of small companies are using it. And the reason is it's just easy to work with. It kind of reminds me and harkens back to the PHP days of integrating business logic with your HTML, but it does it in a much cleaner way that's testable and readable, and I think a lot of people, including myself, really enjoy working with it. So to get started, all we're going to do is make sure that we have a Node version. I'm using 8.9.3, but you should be able to do something like you should have npm installed. Great. So I've got those things, and I also installed create React app. I've already done it, but that's the command. And all these things, if you go and say, hey, how do I deal with React, there'll be suggestions on doing some of these things. Cool. So carrying on, I created a React app already, and it's just called a to-do list. And so we're just going to go through and kind of build this to-do list really quickly today. And then we're going to use that to-do list to kind of expand upon it for a little while, and then we're going to start building other stuff. So that's going to be the overall goal, and it should be fun. And so we're going to integrate React and Redux and sagas and hopefully build something fun, or at least get you to a point where you can build something that you're excited about. All right. So I'm just going to go into that folder, and then I'm going to open up VS Code. So I'm using VS Code, and here we are. So when you open up your first React app, what you're going to be brought to is basically this page. You're going to already have a gitignore installed. You're going to have a package.json alive. You'll have a yarn lock file. And if you haven't installed Yarn, you should probably do that. You'll have some node modules. And you'll have this public directory and this source directory. So where we're going to be working primarily is in the source directory. So we have this nice little initial starter piece, this app.js, and it's already filled in with this code right here, and we're just going to walk through that really quickly. So we're importing React and the component from React, and we're pulling in a logo, and we're pulling in some CSS, and then we're building out this component that React is then going to render to the screen using Webpack. All right. And a local server. And so we're going to see that happen all right now as well. All right, so basically we have a div, we have a header, we have an image, some h1, just HTML, but strangely, it's inside of a JS file. And so what this code here that I've kind of highlighted it is JSX, which is basically a rendering strategy that Webpack and Babel are using, well, Babel mainly is using to kind of abstract away the functions that are going to be creating these components on the page. So, cool. So that's basically what it's doing. But it allows you to write what looks like HTML, and we're going to kind of, it's going to look like extended HTML in a second to the page. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to have to yarn install some stuff, so just yarn is the command. This is just going to make sure that all my dependencies are up to date. Cool. And then when we create a React app, we can actually just then get it up and running with yarn start. So it'll run a little script for you, and I'll pull in localhost. And we'll talk about some of those things I had up in a second. But here's what we got. We got the logo, we got the welcome to create React, and we got this nice little thing, which is equivalent to what we have here. And we can actually just edit it right now. So if we change that, and we refresh this page. Whoops, did I not save it? Sorry, I thought I saved it. All right, cool. So now it automatically updated, so it's kind of live reloading. So it's a great way to get started. And now you can just play around. So if you're an HTML, CSS expert, you can just like build all of your HTML and CSS in here, and you could have a functional React page. But that's really not what React's really great at. What it's really good at is kind of being able to basically start here and basically build pieces as little components that kind of inherit from its parent, or are kind of standalone pieces that can kind of be Legoified, just like HTML sections. So like this header section. So you can kind of make a bunch of custom HTML that has both renders something as well as contains CSS and contains other types of business logic. All right, so let's get going and build our first component. So all we're going to do today is we're just going to build a to-do list. I already have a list of to-dos. So our to-dos for this whole kind of course that I'm trying to go through is we're going to learn React. We're going to talk about components, props, and state. We're going to learn some testing. We're going to integrate React with a backend. And there will be some ancillary learning. And maybe we're going to have some more things that we're going to eventually add. And we don't really want a static to-do list, but we've got one for now. And so we're just going to start with a static to-do list, and then we're going to extend that to a more dynamic and editable to-do list, all using React. Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and build our first component. All right. So maybe we want to call that first component the list. So we're going to say import list from, and obviously we don't have this file yet, but it's good to kind of have it in mind already. So we'll say from components / components / list. All right. So now we're expecting to have this list, and we're going to want to render that list here. So we're just going to say, hey, do something with that list. And so we've imported this thing that we haven't really talked about what it's going to be, but it's going to be a React component. And we said, hey, now that we have it, let's use it in our rendered component. So let's go ahead and make that component and kind of talk about what that thing is even. So let's go new file. And we're just going to say, sorry, we're going to say new folder. And that new folder is going to be components. And inside the components folder, we're going to have a new file. We're just going to be, let's just call it list.js. All right, so now we're in that list.js file. All right, so we're going to import React. And it's capital React. Sorry. Jeez. And one of the things with my videos, for those of you who haven't seen them, I just make errors. It's just going to be how it is. I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to do anything else. So you can see all the screw-ups in total amazing glory. All right, so we're just going to export a function, and we're just going to call that thing a list. And we're just going to make it really easy at the beginning. So, and all it's going to return is some more of that JSX code. And we'll make a p tag inside of that. And then we're going to export default that list. All right, so now we've kind of created our little Hello World app. And let's go and see if it's working. All right, so there's our Hello World on our localhost. Great. So now I've done something. So one of the nice things about these React components, this list is our first component. This is just a functional component. All it is a JavaScript function that returns JSX. It could even just return business logic or nothing. So if we wanted to, we could just return null, and that's totally valid. It just wouldn't do anything. And there are times when you want to return null. Sometimes if you want to conditionally render something, you might want to return null in certain conditions. Anyways, this function takes a couple of different components. So you can pass in arguments into here, And the first one is the props argument. So we're going to say, just call this elements. And it comes from props, so we're going to destructure it and use those elements. So in our original app, we can pass in what looks like a class or kind of the normal pieces of normal HTML. So you can make custom attributes, but this one is going to be a specific one that matches the name that we see here. So elements, and we're going to start off with just a string, and then we're going to keep going and make it into more and more complicated things. So we're going to say hello world. So now our list has become a little bit more generic. So we say, hey, we're going to be able to pass in something and then do something with that that thing. So we're stripping it out of the props right here, and now we can do something with it. And we could just say, hey, let's put our elements here. And I intentionally put a different casing on that because it used to be capital hello world, and now when we save it, now it's lowercase hello world. So we've somehow passed that this hello world here into the props that are going to exist here. All right, well, we have this nice little list of to-dos, and we're exporting it. So I bet we could probably pull that into our app if we really wanted to, right? So we'd say, hey, let's import our to-dos from data, so it's in the data folder, slash to-dos.js. So it's just to-dos. Great. So now I have this constant that we're going to be using, and maybe we want to pass that as our elements. And anytime you're using JavaScript in your JSX, you have to wrap it in these curly braces. All right, so now we're passing in this. So let's look at that to-dos, what it is. It's an array. And it's an array with objects in it, and some non-objects and some strings in it. So kind of doing a bunch of different things. All right, so now when we look at our code, we pass this thing in, and it's like, I have no idea what to do with this thing because objects are not valid as React children. All right, so maybe we have to do something with it. All right, so let's go back over to our list. So we have these elements, and we know what it is. We know it's that to-do list. And we want to be able to render it into our function here. All right, so let's figure out how to do that. So maybe we want to say, hey, elements.map. So we want to go through all those elements. Oh, let's start off and just say, hey, what if, like looking at this error, maybe you wanted to use an array instead. All right, so let's just make an array and see what happens if we say throw in an array here. So let's go 1, 2, 3. All right, so it seems to think that arrays might be okay. So let's just go ahead and look at that. Oh, look, hey, 1, 2, 3. Awesome. All right, so that's not that interesting. And if we look at our inspect element, it's probably going to have an error inside of it. Oh, no, nothing. I was expecting a you need unique keys error, but maybe they fix that in this version of React. All right, but it'll render. So what we're passing in is an array with objects in it. So maybe we need to do something with that and flatten it in some manner. All right, so let's go ahead and flatten that. All right, so let's take our list and say something to the effect of whether or not that key value in the array elements is something if we want to flatten it. So let's just flatten that array in those objects. All right, so elements.map, and we want to say the element so we're going to use an arrow function here, and if that element is an array, oops, we're going to have to put this in curly braces as well. Sorry, I've been doing a little bit of Ruby recently, so my syntax is all wonky. All right, and actually let's make this and move this into a function in and of itself. So we're going to say, let's just return a function here, and we're going to say flattened elements. Right. And invoke it with elements. All right, so this function is going to take a value, and we're going to return that value mapped. And basically what that's going to look like, or values, sorry. All right, so what do we want to do? We want to say, hey, if that thing is a string, let's just return it. So if we look at this to-do list, we're just going to hopefully return learn testing and integrate React with the backend. So we're going to start there and kind of work from there. All right, so if value let's see, what do we want to do with that? Well, I guess we want to say if the value is so type value, string, then we're going to return that string, or return that value. All right, pretty simple, and let's go ahead and take a look at it. Oh, type is not defined. Let's see, type of, there we go. All right, cool. So now we've created this thing, so we've basically returned the string, and that doesn't look very good, so let's just do a little bit more, a few more things. So instead of doing it this way, why don't we say, hey, let's make this into an unordered list, and then not just return the value, but we can, again, return JSX. So we'll just say, hey, let's return an li. And again, because we're using a JSX now, we have to put this back into curly braces. Cool. That doesn't look super great. All right. Cool. So now we have a list. All right. So let's just get rid of this importing the CSS. So now it's a left adjusted list. All right, so let's just kind of summarize what we've just done. All right, so we started with the app, created it. We created our first component called this list component. We passed in a prop called elements. We then used a functional component, and that this, again, this first piece of this prop, or the first argument that's passed to this function are the props. We destructured the props and just pulled out the element piece of it. And then we flattened those elements. And we should probably clean this up in a bit. But we basically created all of our different values. All right, so in the next video, we're just going to go through and take that algorithm and actually flatten it so that we can actually deep flatten it and kind of build out a to-do list that has multiple layers, right? So we have learn React as a key, and then we have all these values that are associated with that key that we kind of want to have as sublists, rather than just having learn testing and integrate React with the backend. Cool. So we'll just stop that video here.